long before Netflix, before bedtime snacks, before even the idea of before, there was a silence so deep, even thoughts refused to echo. Welcome to Ginnungagap, the cosmic void where nothing happened, and that nothing was everything. In the beginning, and we use that word loosely, there was no beginning, no stars, no planets, no gods, no bedtime stories, just a vast, yawning emptiness called Ginnungagap. It wasn't dark, because darkness requires light to contrast. It wasn't cold, because cold needs warmth to disagree with. It was simply not. Imagine the universe as a giant nap that hadn't started yet. No ticking clocks, no snoring giants, just the potential for everything, wrapped in the quietest silence imaginable. But on either side of this void, two realms were already having a bit of a personality clash. To the south was Muspelheim, the realm of fire, a place so hot it made volcanoes look like lukewarm soup. It was ruled by Surt, a fire giant with a flaming sword and a permanent scowl. Muspelheim didn't do chill. To the north was Niflheim, the realm of ice and mist, a frosty wasteland where socks never dried and breath turned to fog mid-sentence. It was cold, damp, and deeply committed to being uncomfortable. And in the middle, Ginnungagap, the awkward cosmic waiting room between fire and ice. Eventually, the heat from Muspelheim and the frost from Niflheim crept toward each other, like shy party guests. When they met in the middle, they didn't argue. They merged, and from that steamy, icy handshake came something unexpected. A giant. Not just any giant. The first giant. His name was Ymir, and he was born from the melting gneiss. Like a surprise guest at a party no one planned, Ymir was enormous, sweaty, and deeply confused. He didn't know why he existed, but he did what any self-respecting, primordial being would do. He took a nap, and from his armpits and feet, other giants began to grow. Yes, Norse mythology is weird like that. But Ymir wasn't alone for long. From the salty ice blocks, a cow named Audumla emerged. She was majestic, gentle, and spent her days licking ice like it was her job. And one day, she licked out a man named Buri, the ancestor of the gods. And just like that, the void wasn't so empty anymore. If you're still awake, congratulations, you've survived the void. Now gently tap that like button, like Audhumla licking an ice block. Subscribe like you're joining Odin's Raven newsletter, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Midgard, Jotunheim, or just your cozy bed. Before gods threw lightning and giants threw tantrums, the universe was still figuring itself out. On one side of the great void of Ginnungagap, there was Muspelheim, a realm so hot it made lava look like lukewarm tea. It was the original do not touch zone. Muspelheim was home to Surt, a fire giant with a flaming sword, and the temperament of a volcano with a caffeine addiction. He didn't do small talk. He didn't do hugs. He did burning. Constant, unapologetic burning. On the opposite side was Niflheim, the realm of ice, mist, and the kind of cold that makes your nose run just thinking about it. It was ruled by, well, no one really. It was more of a self-service freezer. Fog drifted lazily. Ice formed wherever it pleased, and the rivers of venom flowed like sleepy snakes on a winter stroll. Now, you might think these two realms would avoid each other like socks and sandals. But no, they were drawn together by the mysterious pull of Ginnungagap. Like two awkward guests at a cosmic mixer, they slowly crept toward the center, and when the heat of Muspelheim met the frost of Niflheim, something magical happened. The ice began to melt, the fire began to steam, and from that swirling chaos of opposites came life, or at least something that looked like it. Out of the melting ice emerged Ymir, the first giant, who promptly began sweating other giants into existence. Yes, Norse mythology is a bit sweaty, and not far behind came Audhumla, the cosmic cow, who licked salty ice blocks like they were gourmet popsicles. Together, fire and ice had created the ingredients for everything: giants, cows, and eventually gods, all because two realms couldn't mind their own business. From the melting ice of Ginnungagap, stirred by the clash of fire and frost, emerged a being so large, so sweaty, and so confused that the universe had to pause and ask, is this normal? His name was Ymir, and he was the first giant. He didn't have parents, hobbies, or a favorite snack. He simply existed, a walking contradiction of ice-born warmth and cosmic awkwardness. Ymir slept a lot, and while he slept, something strange happened. Giants began to ooze out of him, one from his armpit, another from his feet. It was less biology and more mythological plumbing. These were the Hrimthursar, the frost giants, and they weren't exactly friendly, but they were family, in the weird cousin at the reunion kind of way. But Ymir wasn't alone in this chilly new world. From the same melting ice came a creature of elegance and purpose, Audhumla, the cosmic cow. Audhumla didn't sweat giants. She didn't roar or stomp. She licked. That was her thing. She licked the salty ice blocks with the dedication of a cow who knew her job mattered. And as she licked, something began to emerge from the ice, slowly, like a frozen popsicle, revealing a surprise center. After 3 days of licking, Audhumla uncovered a man named Buri. He was handsome, mysterious, and very confused to be licked into existence. Buri would go on to father Bor, who would father Odin, Vili, and Ve, the trio of gods who would eventually shape the world. But for now, the universe was still mostly ice, mist, and mooing. Ymir drank the milk from Audhumla's endless udders. Growing stronger and sweatier, the frost giants multiplied, and somewhere in the background, destiny was stretching and yawning, preparing for the next chapter. From the salty ice licked by the cosmic cow, Audhumla, a man named Buri emerged, blinking, stretching, and wondering why everything smelled faintly of cow breath. He didn't ask questions. He simply existed, tall and noble, the first of the divine line. Buri had a son named Bor, who eventually married a giantess named Bestla. Giants and gods weren't exactly best friends, but love doesn't check family trees. Together, they had 3 sons, Odin, Vili, and Ve. These brothers weren't ordinary children. They didn't play tag or argue over bedtime. They were born with purpose and a growing sense that the world needed organizing and maybe a bit of redecorating. At this point, Ymir, the first giant, was still stomping around, sweating out frost giants and hogging all the cosmic space. The brothers looked at him and thought, this guy's a bit much. So they did what any ambitious trio of divine siblings might do. They slayed Ymir. It wasn't a polite disagreement. It was a full-on mythic takedown. Ymir's enormous body collapsed, and from it, the brothers began crafting the world like sleepy sculptors with a very large canvas. His blood became the oceans, rivers, and lakes. His bones turned into mountains. His teeth became rocks. His skull was lifted high to form the sky, held up by 4 dwarves named North, South, East, and West, who probably didn't sign up for that job. And his eyebrows? They became the walls of Midgard, the realm of humans. Yes, the world is literally brow-shaped. It's a hairy truth. With Ymir gone and the world taking shape, the three brothers stood back and admired their work. It was messy, dramatic, and slightly damp, but it was theirs. And so, the first gods had arrived. Odin, the wise and wandering one. Vili, the spirited and creative one. Ve, the mysterious and silent one. Together, they had turned chaos into cosmos, and the saga was only just beginning when Odin, Vili, and Ve defeated the giant Ymir. The universe didn't come with a cleanup crew, so the brothers looked at the enormous, lifeless body sprawled across the void and thought, well, we might as well use it. And so, with the creativity of divine interior decorators and the practicality of cosmic recyclers, they began to build the world. First, they took Ymir's blood, gallons and gallons of it, and poured it into the lowest places of the void. These became the seas, lakes, and rivers. If you've ever wondered why the ocean feels a bit salty and mysterious, well, now you know. It's giant juice. Next came the flesh. They spread it out and shaped it into the land. Hills, valleys, and plains. His bones were stacked into mountains, jagged and proud. His teeth and jawbones became rocks and cliffs, scattered like forgotten snacks across the landscape. Then they looked up and thought, we need a ceiling. So they took Ymir's skull, flipped it like a giant bowl, and propped it up with 4 sturdy dwarves, north, south, east, and west, who were probably just standing around when they got volunteered. To light the sky, they grabbed sparks from Muspelheim and flung them into the dome. These became the stars, twinkling like cosmic glitter. They even set the sun and moon on chariots, pulled by horses that ran across the sky on a strict schedule. The gods were nothing if not punctual, but the world still felt a bit drafty. So they used Ymir's eyebrows, thick and bristly, to build a protective wall around the human realm. This became Midgard, the middle world, nestled safely between the realms of gods and giants. Finally, they gave the world a name, Midgard, the realm of humans. It was surrounded by a vast ocean, and in that ocean slithered a serpent so large it could wrap around the world and bite its own tail. But that's a story for another night. For now, the world was shaped. The sky arched above, the seas shimmered below, mountains stood tall, and stars blinked sleepily in the heavens. And all of it, every rock, wave, and breeze, came from the body of a very large, very unfortunate giant, with the world shaped from the body of a very large and very unfortunate giant. The gods took a moment to admire their handiwork. Oceans shimmered, mountains stood tall, stars blinked politely, but something was missing. There were no humans, no one to tell stories, no one to forget where they put their keys, no one to look up at the stars and wonder if they were blinking back. One day, as Odin, Vili, and Ve strolled along the shore of their newly built Midgard, they found 2 logs just lying there. Driftwood, really, nothing fancy. But the gods, being gods, saw potential in everything, even soggy sticks. So they did what any divine trio might do. They made people. Odin gave them breath, the gentle inhale of life. Vili gave them mind, the ability to think, dream, and occasionally overthink. Ve gave them form and speech, bodies to move, and words to complain about Mondays. The gods named them Ask and Embla. Ask was made from ashwood, Embla from elm. They were the first humans, curious, fragile, and full of questions. To keep them safe, the gods placed them inside the eyebrow-walled realm of Midgard, surrounded by oceans and guarded from giants. It wasn't perfect, but it was home. Ask and Embla began the long, slow journey of humanity. They built fires. They told stories. They forgot things. They remembered things. They looked up at the stars and wondered. And so, from two pieces of driftwood, a trio of creative gods, the human race began. Sleepy, curious, and ready to explore a world made from a giant's bones. Once the world was shaped, and humans were wandering around Midgard, wondering how to make fire without burning their eyebrows. The gods turned their attention to something bigger, something that would hold the entire cosmos together. They didn't build a bridge. They didn't install a cosmic elevator. They grew a tree, not just any tree. This was Yggdrasil, the world tree, a towering ash that stretched from the deepest roots of existence to the highest branches of the heavens. It was the spine of the universe, the cosmic coat rack where all the realms hung like sleepy jackets. Yggdrasil had 3 mighty roots, each reaching into a different realms. One root stretched into Asgard, the realm of the gods, where Odin sat on his throne and tried not to look too smug. Another reached into Jotunheim, the land of giants, where things were loud, muddy, and occasionally thrown. The third root burrowed into Niflheim, the realm of ice and mist, where a dragon named Nidhogger gnawed at it like a bored puppy with a chew toy. The tree was alive, not just with leaves and bark, but with drama. A squirrel named Ratatoskr scampered up and down its trunk, delivering insults between the eagle at the top and the dragon at the bottom. It was the universe's first gossip courier. Deer nibbled at its branches. Gods held meetings beneath its shade, and somewhere in the bark, secrets were whispered, runes, destinies, and the occasional complaint about squirrel traffic. Yggdrasil connected 9 realms, each with its own flavor of chaos. Asgard, home of the Aesir gods, full of halls, feasts, and occasional lightning. Midgard, the human realm, eyebrow-walled and ocean-wrapped. Vanaheim, land of the Vanir gods, who preferred peace, magic, and long walks. Jotunheim, giant territory where everything was slightly too large and slightly too angry. Alfheim, realm of the light elves, sparkly and mysterious. Svartalfheim, or Nidavellir, home of dwarves, master craftsmen with strong opinions and short tempers. Niflheim, cold, misty, and full of forgotten socks. Muspelheim, fiery, dramatic, and ruled by Surt, who never smiled. Helheim, the underworld, ruled by Hel, daughter of Loki, where the dead went to nap forever. Yggdrasil held it all together, a living map of existence, a cosmic treehouse for gods, giants, elves, and humans alike. And though it stood tall and proud, even Yggdrasil wasn't safe from time. Its roots were gnawed, its branches trembled, and somewhere deep within its bark, the whisper of Ragnarok began to stir, with Yggdrasil standing tall and the 9 realms dangling from its branches like ornaments on a cosmic tree. It was time to explore the neighborhoods of the Norse universe, each one strange, dramatic, and occasionally drafty. At the top of the tree, nestled in the clouds and shimmering with divine pride, was Asgard, the realm of the Aesir gods. It was a place of golden halls, endless feasts, and very serious meetings about fate and fashion. Odin ruled here, sitting on his high throne in Valaskialf, where he could see all 9 realms, like a very nosy landlord. The most famous hall in Asgard was Valhalla, where warriors who died bravely in battle were welcomed with meat, mead, and daily sparring matches. It was like a gym with a buffet and no closing hours. Down below, in the middle of everything, was Midgard, the realm of humans. It was surrounded by a vast ocean, and in that ocean slithered Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent, so large he could wrap around the world and bite his own tail. Midgard was protected by a wall made from Ymir's eyebrows, which was both practical and slightly itchy. Beyond Midgard and Asgard were realms stranger still. There was Vanaheim, home of the Vanir gods, who were more peaceful and magical than their Aesir cousins. They liked nature, spells, and long walks through misty forests. Alfheim sparkled with light, the realm of the light elves, who were beautiful, mysterious, and probably very good at interior decorating. Svartalfheim, also known as Nidavellir, was the realm of dwarves, master craftsmen who lived underground and built magical items like Thor's hammer and Odin's spear. They were short, grumpy, and extremely talented. Jotunheim was the land of giants, wild and untamed. Mountains loomed, storms brewed, and the giants grumbled about gods and taxes. Muspelheim burned with eternal fire, ruled by Surt, the flaming giant who didn't believe in subtlety. It was the realm of heat, destruction, and dramatic entrances. And finally, there was Helheim, the underworld, ruled by Hel, daughter of Loki. It was cold, quiet, and filled with souls who hadn't died in battle. No feasts, no sparring, just a long, eternal nap. Each realm had its own flavor, its own drama, and its own place in the grand tapestry of Yggdrasil. And though they were separate, they were all connected by roots, branches, and the occasional squirrel with a message. With the world shaped and the realms settled into their cosmic treehouse, the gods began to stretch, settle, and squabble, as gods often do. At the center of it all was Odin, the eldest of the 3 brothers, and the one who never stopped asking questions. Odin wasn't content with just ruling Asgard and throwing feasts. He wanted wisdom, deep, mysterious, ancient wisdom, the kind that whispered secrets about fate, magic, and the end of all things. And Odin was willing to pay for it. First, he visited Mimir's well, a sacred spring beneath one of Yggdrasil's roots. Mimir, the guardian of the well, was wise and grumpy and didn't give out knowledge for free. So Odin did something bold. He plucked out one of his eyes and dropped it into the well as payment. From that moment on, Odin saw the world with one eye, but he understood it with 1,000 thoughts. He became the god of wisdom, poetry, and very intense staring. But that wasn't enough. Odin also hung himself from Yggdrasil, upside down for 9 days and nights, pierced by a spear, without food or drink. It wasn't a dare. It was a ritual, and at the end of it, he discovered the runes, magical symbols that held the power of language, fate, and cosmic bureaucracy. Odin's thirst for knowledge made him a wanderer. He traveled through realms in disguise, collecting stories, making deals, and occasionally causing trouble. He had 2 ravens, Hugin and Munin, who flew across the world each day and returned with news. They were his eyes and ears, and possibly his gossip column. As Odin grew wiser, the Aesir gods rose around him. Frigg, his wife, knew the future, but rarely shared it. Thor, his son, wielded a hammer and a booming laugh. Tyr was brave. Heimdall was watchful. And Baldr was so radiant, he practically glowed. Together, they ruled Asgard, kept an eye on Midgard, and tried to keep Loki from turning everything into a prank. But Odin always knew that wisdom came with a price, and that even gods couldn't outrun fate forever. In the golden halls of Asgard, where gods feasted and thunder rumbled like distant snoring, there lived a figure who didn't quite fit the mold. He wasn't noble like Odin, strong like Thor, or radiant like Baldr. He was clever, slippery, and always up to something. His name was Loki. Loki was a trickster, a shapeshifter, and a walking headache. He was technically a god, but also technically a giant. He was Odin's blood brother, which meant he got invited to all the important events, and usually caused a scene. He could change shape at will. One day, he was a salmon, the next a mare, the next an old woman with suspicious advice. He once turned into a fly just to sabotage someone's work. He once turned into a horse and gave birth to another horse. Yes, Loki gave birth to an 8-legged steed named Sleipnir, who became Odin's favorite ride. Loki's mischief wasn't always malicious. Sometimes he helped the gods, like when he tricked dwarves into forging magical treasures. Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, Gungnir, Odin's spear, and Draupnir, a ring that multiplied itself. He even got a golden boar and a ship that could be folded like a napkin. Not bad for a day's chaos, but Loki's help always came with a twist. He insulted guests. He made bets he couldn't keep. He played pranks that ended in curses. He once cut off Sif's hair, just for fun, and had to replace it with magical golden strands. He was the universe's most creative problem, and sometimes its solution. The gods tolerated Loki because he was useful. He was funny. He was unpredictable. But deep down, they knew that mischief has a shadow, and that Loki's tricks would one day go too far. For now, he danced through Asgard like a breeze with a smirk, leaving behind laughter, confusion, and the occasional magical horse. In the golden halls of Asgard, where gods lounged and lightning occasionally crackled through the ceiling, there was one thing they loved almost as much as feasting: treasures. Not shiny coins or glittery gems, though those were nice. No, the gods preferred magical artifacts, each with a story, a purpose, and a tendency to cause drama. It all began with a prank. Loki, ever the mischief maker, decided to cut off Sif's golden hair, Sif being Thor, as wife and proud owner of the most radiant locks in the realm. Thor was not amused. His thunder rumbled, his fists clenched. Loki, sensing that his joke had gone too far, promised to fix it. So, he traveled to Svartalfheim, the realm of dwarves, where the finest craftsmen in the cosmos lived underground and argued about metallurgy. Loki convinced 2 dwarf brothers, Ivaldi's sons, to forge new hair for Sif, strands of gold that would grow like real hair. But Loki didn't stop there. He challenged another pair of dwarves, Brock and Sindri, to a crafting contest. If they could make better treasures, he'd give them fame. If they failed, he'd give them a fly in the face. Literally, Loki turned into a fly, tried to sabotage their work mid-forge. Despite the buzzing nuisance, Brock and Sindri succeeded. They crafted Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, short-handled due to Loki's interference, but powerful enough to summon lightning and flatten mountains. Gungnir, Odin's spear, perfectly balanced and always on target. Draupnir, a golden ring that multiplied itself every 9 nights. Gullinbursti, a golden boar that glowed and ran faster than any horse. Skidbladnir, a ship that could sail on any sea and fold into a pouch when not in use. The gods were thrilled. Thor got his hammer, Odin got his spear, Sif got her hair, and Loki, well, Loki got a lecture and a few bruises. These treasures weren't just fancy tools. They were symbols of power, protection, and divine craftsmanship. Mjolnir became Thor's signature weapon, feared by giants and admired by gods. Gungnir was Odin's declaration of fate. Draupnir was wealth without greed. And somewhere in Asgard, tucked into velvet-lined drawers and golden chests, these treasures waited, humming with magic, ready for the next adventure. Far beyond the golden halls of Asgard and the cozy eyebrow-walled realm of Midgard lay a land that rumbled, roared, and occasionally threw boulders for fun. This was Jotunheim, the realm of the giants, also known as the Jotnar. Jotunheim wasn't polished or peaceful. It was wild, rugged, and slightly muddy. Mountains loomed like sleepy giants themselves. Storms brewed without warning, and the residents were large, loud, and not particularly fond of gods. The Jotnar came in many shapes and sizes. Some were made of frost, others of stone, and a few were just confusing. They weren't all evil, but they were unpredictable, like cosmic toddlers with super strength and a grudge. The gods of Asgard and the giants of Jotunheim had a complicated relationship. They fought, feasted, married, and occasionally borrowed things without asking. Odin himself had giant blood through his mother Bestla, and many gods had giant spouses, friends, or rivals, but the balance was delicate. The giants represented chaos, nature, and the untamed forces of the world. The gods stood for order, civilization, and the occasional thunderstorm. Together, they kept the universe from tipping too far in either direction, like a cosmic seesaw with very dramatic participants. Thor, the thunder god, was the most frequent visitor to Jotunheim. He loved smashing giants with Mjolnir, his trusty hammer, and they loved trying to outwit him, usually failing, but always trying. His journeys were legendary, filled with disguises, contests, and the occasional goat-powered chariot ride. Despite the tension, the gods needed the giants, and the giants needed the gods. They were opposites, but also reflections. Without chaos, order becomes stale. Without order, chaos becomes exhausting. And so, the giants of Jotunheim roared and rumbled, reminding the gods that power must be balanced, and that even the strongest hammer can't silence the storm forever. In the shining halls of Asgard, where golden light spilled across polished floors and gods lounged in divine comfort, there lived a god who seemed to glow from within. His name was Baldr, and he was so radiant, kind, and beloved that even flowers leaned toward him when he passed. Baldr was the god of light, beauty, and joy. He was the kind of presence that made everyone feel a little warmer, a little happier, and a little more poetic. His smile could calm storms. His voice could soothe giants. Even Loki, the trickster, found it hard to insult him, though he certainly tried. Baldr's wife was Nanna, gentle and graceful, and together they were the golden couple of Asgard. Their son, Forseti, would grow up to be the god of justice, settling disputes with fairness and a very calm tone. But even light has shadows. One day, Baldr began to have dreams, dark, troubling visions of his own death. The gods grew worried. Odin, ever the seeker of knowledge, rode Sleipnir to the underworld to consult a dead seer. The news was grim. Baldr's death was fated, and nothing could stop it. Frigg, Baldr's mother, sprang into action. She traveled across the realms, asking every object, creature, and plant to promise not to harm Baldr. Stones agreed, fire agreed, water agreed, even diseases promised to behave. It was a cosmic peace treaty, and Baldr became invincible. To celebrate, the gods made a game of it. They threw spears, rocks, and axes at Baldr, watching them bounce off harmlessly. It was like dodgeball with a cheat code. Everyone laughed, everyone cheered, everyone except Loki. Loki, curious and quietly bitter, discovered that Frigg had missed one thing: a tiny plant called mistletoe. It was too young, too harmless, too overlooked to be asked for a promise. So Loki crafted a dart from mistletoe and gave it to Hodr, Baldr's blind brother. He guided Hodr's hand, aimed the dart, and let it fly. It struck Baldr, and Baldr fell. The laughter stopped. The light dimmed. The gods stood in stunned silence as the brightest among them lay still. Baldr's death was the beginning of sorrow in Asgard. A crack in the golden walls, a whisper of the end to come. And though the gods tried to undo it, fate had already turned the page. Baldr, the brightest god, had fallen, struck by a dart of mistletoe, guided by Loki's clever cruelty and Hodr's innocent hand. The golden halls of Asgard dimmed. The gods, who had once laughed and feasted, now sat in stunned silence, their joy shattered like a dropped goblet. Baldr's body was laid upon a great ship called Hringhorni, the largest ever built. The gods prepared it for his funeral, piling it with treasures, flowers, and the quiet weight of grief. His wife, Nanna, overcome with sorrow, collapsed and died beside him. She was placed on the ship too, so they could journey together into the afterlife. But there was a problem. The ship wouldn't move. It was stuck, stubborn as grief itself. So, the gods called upon a giantess named Hyrrokin, who arrived riding a wolf and using snakes as reins. With a mighty shove, she launched the ship into the sea, flames rising as Baldr and Nanna sailed toward the realm of the dead. Still, the gods weren't ready to let go. Odin sent Hermodr, the swiftest among them, riding Sleipnir into Helheim, the underworld ruled by Hel, Loki's daughter. Hermodr pleaded for Baldr's return, explaining how beloved he was, how the world mourned him. Hel listened. She made an offer. If every creature in the world wept for Baldr, he could return. And so, the gods sent messengers across the realms. Trees wept, stones wept, animals wept, even giants shed tears. The world cried, except for one. A mysterious figure named Thok, hiding in a cave, refused to weep. She said Baldr meant nothing to her. She would not cry. The gods suspected it was Loki in disguise, smirking in the shadows, ensuring Baldr stayed in Helheim. With that single refusal, the deal was broken. Baldr remained among the dead. The light did not return. The gods were furious. Loki's mischief had crossed a line. No longer a prankster, he was now a traitor. And so, the golden halls of Asgard grew colder. The laughter faded. The seeds of Ragnarok were quietly planted. After the death of Baldr, the golden halls of Asgard were quiet. The gods mourned. The light had dimmed, and in the shadows, Loki smirked, proud of his trick. even as the world trembled from it. But mischief has limits, and Loki had crossed them. The gods gathered. They whispered. They glared. And finally, they acted. Loki, sensing the mood shift, ran. He disguised himself as a fish, slipped through rivers, and hid in caves. But the gods were determined. They found him in a remote cave, clinging to a rock, slippery as ever. They dragged him out, not with anger, but with the quiet resolve of those who had been hurt too deeply. As punishment, they brought him to a cavern deep beneath the earth. There, they placed him on a flat stone and bound him with unbreakable chains, crafted from the entrails of his own son. Yes, Norse mythology gets dark. Above him, they hung a venomous serpent, its fangs dripping poison. The serpent's venom fell, drop by drop, onto Loki's face, burning, stinging, endless. But Loki was not alone. His wife, Sigyn, stood beside him, loyal and sorrowful. She held a bowl above his face, catching the venom. She stayed there, day after day, her arms trembling, her heart heavy. Only when the bowl was full did she step away to empty it. And in that moment, the venom fell. Loki writhed. He screamed. The earth shook. These tremors became earthquakes, reminders of his suffering. And so Loki remained, bound beneath the world, punished not just for mischief, but for betrayal. The gods returned to Asgard, quieter now, knowing that even laughter must be guarded. But Loki's story wasn't over. Deep in the shadows, he waited, and somewhere in the roots of Yggdrasil, the whisper of Ragnarok grew louder. Deep beneath the roots of Yggdrasil, where shadows whispered and serpents stirred, the world began to shift. The gods sensed it. The giants felt it. Even the squirrels paused mid-gossip. Something was coming. It began with a chill. Not a cozy, blanket-worthy chill, but a biting, endless cold. This was Fimble Winter, the great winter that would last 3 years, without pause. No spring, no summer, just snow, ice, and silence. The winds howled. The sun vanished. Crops failed. Families huddled together, telling stories and hoping the frost would forget them. But Fimble Winter was no ordinary season. It was a warning. The first sign that Ragnarok, the end of all things, was drawing near. As the cold deepened, so did the chaos. Brothers turned against brothers. Parents and children stopped trusting each other. The warmth of community faded, replaced by suspicion and sorrow. Even the gods, high in Asgard, felt the weight of the coming storm. The Midgard serpent, Jormungandr, stirred in the ocean, its coils tightening around the world. Fenrir, the monstrous wolf and child of Loki, grew restless in his bonds, and Hel, ruler of the underworld, watched quietly, knowing her realm would soon overflow. The skies darkened, the stars blinked uncertainly, and somewhere in the distance, the sound of a horn, faint but growing, began to echo. It was Heimdall's horn, waiting to be blown, waiting to signal the final battle. But for now, the world slept beneath snow. The gods watched, the giants prepared, and the tree of life trembled, leaf by leaf. The end was not here yet, but it was close, and the frost would not melt again. Long before the frost of a Fimble Winter and the roar of Fenrir, there was a whisper, a quiet, ancient prophecy that even Odin couldn't ignore. It spoke of Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, the unraveling of the world, and the final chapter of everything. The prophecy didn't shout. It crept. It told of a time when bonds would break, when monsters would rise, and when even the mighty would fall. It was written in runes, etched into memory and carried by ravens across the 9 realms. Odin, ever the seeker of truth, had glimpsed it in visions. He had traded his eye for wisdom, hung from Yggdrasil for knowledge, and listened to the dead for answers. But the prophecy remained, cold, clear, and unchanging. It foretold that Loki would break free from his chains and lead the giants in battle. Fenrir, the great wolf, would devour the sun, plunging the world into darkness. Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent, would rise from the sea, poisoning the skies and battling Thor. Surtur, the fire giant of Muspelheim, would march with a flaming sword, setting the world ablaze. The gods would fight bravely, Odin against Fenrir, Thor against Jormungandr, Heimdall against Loki, and they would fall. Even Yggdrasil, the world tree, would tremble and crack, its roots torn, its branches scorched. But the prophecy didn't end with destruction. It whispered of rebirth, of a new world rising from the ashes, green and quiet, of surviving gods and 2 human children, Leif and Lifthrasir, who would hide in the woods and emerge to begin again. The stars would return, the sun would be reborn, and the cycle would continue, not as a repeat, but as a renewal. For now, the prophecy waited. The gods prepared, the monsters stirred, and the world held its breath, knowing that even endings can be beginnings. The frost had settled, the stars had dimmed, and deep in the roots of Yggdrasil, the final threads of fate began to unravel. It started with a sound, Heimdall's horn, blown with all the force of destiny. Its echo rang through the 9 realms, waking gods, giants, and monsters alike. It was the signal. Ragnarok had begun. The skies split open. Fire poured from Muspelheim, led by Surtur, the flaming giant with a sword that could scorch the stars. The seas boiled as Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent, rose from the depths, his breath poisoning the air and his coils shaking the earth. From the shadows came Loki, no longer bound, no longer laughing. He marched with the giants, his eyes sharp, his heart full of vengeance. Beside him strode Fenrir, the monstrous wolf, jaws wide enough to swallow the sun. The gods gathered in Vigrid, the great battlefield. Odin rode Sleipnir, his 8-legged steed, toward Fenrir, knowing he would not return. Thor faced Jormungandr, hammer in hand, thunder in his veins. Freyr stood against Surtur, armed with a sword he had once given away. Tyr battled the Houndgarm, and Heimdall met Loki in a clash of fate and fury. The battle was fierce, chaotic, and final. Odin fell to Fenrir's jaws. Thor slew the serpent, but staggered 9 steps before falling to its venom. Heimdall and Loki struck each other down. Fire consumed the world. The sky cracked. The tree trembled. And then, silence. The world was ash and smoke. The gods were gone. The monsters were gone. Even Yggdrasil had splintered. But from the quiet came a whisper of renewal. 2 humans, Leif and Lifthrasir, emerged from the woods, having hidden through the chaos. The sun returned, reborn from its ashes. A few gods survived. Baldr, radiant once more, and Hodr, forgiven and gentle. The world began again, not as it was, but as it could be. And so, Ragnarok was not just the end. It was the turning of a page, a cosmic exhale, a bedtime story, with a new morning waiting just beyond the stars. The horn had sounded. The monsters had risen. The gods had fought. And now, the skies of Asgard burned. At the edge of the battlefield, towering and silent, stood Surtur, the fire giant of Muspelheim. His sword blazed, with the heat of creation undone, a flame so fierce it could melt mountains and silence stars. As the final clashes echoed across Vigrid, Surtur stepped forward. He did not shout, he did not roar, he simply raised his sword, and the world caught fire. Asgard, the shining realm of the gods, trembled. Its golden halls cracked, its towers crumbled. The rainbow bridge, Bifrost, shattered into sparks. The flames leapt from realm to realm, devouring forests, freezing seas into steam, and turning stone to ash. The gods, already fallen in battle, could not stop it. Odin had been swallowed by Fenrir. Thor had collapsed beside the serpent. Heimdall and Loki lay side by side, silent at last. Surtur's fire was not rage, it was destiny, the final act of a story written long before the first rune was carved. Even Yggdrasil, the world tree, groaned and cracked. Its roots burned, its branches curled. The squirrel Ratatoskr fled, his gossip finally silenced. And yet, in the midst of flame and ruin, something stirred. From the ashes of Asgard, from the scorched soil of Midgard, from the quiet corners of the world, life began again. The sun returned, reborn from its shadow. Two humans, Leif and Lifthrasir, emerged from the woods, blinking at the new dawn. A few gods survived. Baldr, radiant once more, and Hödur, gentle and forgiven. They looked upon the new world not with sorrow, but with hope. Surtur's fire had ended the old, but it had also cleared the way for the new. And so, the fall of Asgard was not just a tragedy, it was a turning, a cosmic breath, a mythic reset, a bedtime story that promised morning. The fire had passed, the battles were over. The sky, once torn by thunder and flame, now shimmered with soft light. The world was quiet, not empty, but waiting. From the ashes of Ragnarok, a new world began to bloom. The land, scorched and broken, slowly healed. Green shoots pushed through the soil. Rivers ran clear again. Mountains stood tall, no longer trembling. The sun, reborn from the daughter of the old sun, rose gently over the horizon, warm, golden, and kind. And from the shelter of the woods of Hodmimis Holt, two humans emerged, Leif and Lifthrasir. They had hidden through the chaos, nestled among the roots of Yggdrasil, listening to the world end in whispers. Now they stepped into the light, blinking, barefoot, and full of hope. They were the beginning of humanity anew. No war, no gods, just the quiet promise of life, laughter, and stories yet to be told. Some gods returned too. Baldr, the radiant one, walked again beneath the sky. Hödur, once blind and burdened, now stood beside him, forgiven and free. Together, they brought wisdom and peace to the new world. Not as rulers, but as gentle guides. The treasures of the old world were gone. The halls of Asgard had fallen, but the spirit of the cosmos, the rhythm of creation, destruction, and rebirth, remained. And so, the cycle continued, not with thunder, but with a breeze, not with fire, but with sunlight on leaves, not with gods shouting, but with children laughing. The world had turned, and in its turning, it had found rest. The saga is complete. The gods have rested, the giants have faded, and the stars blink softly above a world reborn. Close your eyes now, little dreamer. Let the myths settle like snow on your thoughts. The stories will wait. The tree still grows. And tomorrow, the sun will rise again, just as it always has. Good night.